In episode 7 of the fall of House of Usher, which was titled The Pit and The Pendulum, which is based on a very dark story about hope coming out of despair and having the will to survive, but also seeing a cruel person dying in a slow and painful way. As a furious Frederick sets out to handle unfinished business, Madeline receives an anonymous message at a old haunt. Meanwhile, Dupin grows weary of Roderick's motives. We open this episode with seeing a young Freddy who's looking at the clock on the wall, which is something I want you all to remember for later, as he's playing with his toys, which upsets his dad, who's with Dupin preparing for questions for his trial. As Annabelle has a brief moment with Dupin alone, as she wants him to give her his word, as he'll look out for Roderick, who will probably win or lose, will lose his job, and he makes his promise that he will take care of them after this is all said and done. Dupin has always believed that there's no such thing as a good usher, but Roderick corrects him and says that he's wrong because Lenore is the best of all of them. She has all the best traits from her grandmother except for a broken heart, which we learn that it sounds like Annabelle has been gone for a long time. As Roderick is pissed to learn about everything that happened at the launch as well as the death of his daughter, as Madeline tries to explain what happened when she tried to grab Verna, but he doesn't want to believe any of this as this is pointing towards signs of some supernatural activity. As the board is prepared to make a vote, and Fred is a very key vote and he can assure that they won't lose the company. As we witness this private meeting taking place between Pim and Madeline, who believes that her brother isn't fit to remain the CEO of the company after discovering his recent health issues, and she believes that this health issue is causing him to make bad decisions for the company. As she plans to take the company into the tech world and leave the pills behind, she wants to be the new CEO of this company, a decision that she claims is the most difficult one she's ever had to make in her life. Meanwhile, we see Fred has put all the pictures of him and his wife's relationship on the wall for her to stare at as he continues to pump drugs into her system, as he recalls the first day that they met and how it made him feel to meet someone like her. But fast forward to their current situation, he feels that everyone, including his wife, sees him as an unimportant person that can't make decisions and you shouldn't take him too seriously. Cut to Rod telling his son that he needs him and that the board is swinging and he's counting on him, as Freddy claims that he's prepared to protect his family and this company and ensures that he can count on him. Juno sets up this meeting with Rod's private doctor about the recent dose of letadone. She wants to get off this so-called non-addictive drug, and to my surprise, the doctor actually helps her by giving her the advice of how to get off of it, which is you have to do it very slowly, which is something we have a payoff for a little bit later in this episode. Meanwhile, back with Fred and his wife, he's making phone calls to get down Perry's crime scene building, and he wants to get it torn down, and he's calling these people and acting as if he is the current CEO of the company, making himself feel big. But then he tells his wife how his father taught him to get his home in order and get his home straight is to show authority by being cruel. His way to do that is to taking out his wife's teeth. This is a level of cruelty which was so painful to watch, but my goodness, we have such a satisfying conclusion to how they killed this cruel man. Lenore confronts her dad about the specialist never showing up and his recent behavior, which leads to him snapping at her and leaving the house, which sets her on this path of going back to the importance of this episode's title: endurance, surviving, and also saving the ones you care most about. Cut back to the conversation between Dupin and Roderick. He is prepared to leave because he feels like Rod is dragging him along, like he's not getting anywhere, but this is where Rod tells him that he will get him on murder and more than once. Dupin isn't taking this bait, but suddenly the clock on the wall goes off, and this is the first time that he sees what Roderick has been seeing this whole night, which is messages from his dead children, this particular one coming from Freddy. Rod explains that his actions during their conversations tonight has been micromanaged by his children because they want to make sure that he's giving all the right details. All of a sudden, all the buildup that we have been seeing in this scene has been very disturbing, have been having effective jump scares. This might be the most effective one yet, as Freddy appears with his mom, but Freddy is now a younger child. This is a very cruel trick as we see young Freddy's eyes roll to the back of his head, that his body is being split in half. This scene was not only terrifying, but I think it's the best one of the most effective scares till a little bit later in this episode. But this scene was fantastic because it was just so brutal, and also it is a great callback to what's happened a little bit later in this episode. As we flash back to Rod's big day on trial, where his family is there to his surprise, you'll see Madeline giving him a good look, but also look at the look on her face, to me, she gave him a look as almost like they have a plan in place, which we're about to find out. As we cut to the trial proceedings, and to Depend's surprise, Roderick lies and says that the signed documents were indeed his signature, but he also lies about meeting and being prepped for this exact trial. He says that Dupin has been harassing him and his family this whole time. As a clearly upset Dupin walks out of this trial, you'll notice the smirk on Madeline's face as Rod is getting arrested, as we're about to find out that this was all a part of her plan. Now, Madeline details to Annabelle the whole plan behind this. It was to get Roderick as to be the most important person of the company, which will lead to him coming up on top, as Madeline goes even further, throwing insults at Annabelle and her pureness and her kind-heartedness as she calls Madeline small and she leaves. So we cut back to present day and we see Madeline removing her wig, which shows off that she is aging. She doesn't want to show her weakness as she heads into her childhood home to find Verna. She tells her that Rod has been coming to the house recently and dropping off boxes in the basement, and he's been coming there to cry, as Madeline knows this was the same woman they met over 40 years ago. Madeline is here to renegotiate their deal, but Verna refuses, and Madeline seems to talk to her as though they're equals, and she even manages to finally grab her and she snaps Verna's neck, but she appears shortly after. As Madeline apologizes to her, they continue to have their conversation, and Madeline is told that she is one of Verna's favorites and she understands her methods. Cut to a scene of seeing Lenore breaking into her mother's room and sees what her father has done to her. Meanwhile, Juno comes to Rod's office and she wants to get off the drug, as he tells her all the side effects that's going to come with it if she decides to quit, and it'll take an agonizing 3 years to do so. As my theory I've been making for the past few videos have come true, as we see Rod calling himself Frankenstein and she's the monster and his perfect creation. He says that the drug was the water and she was the flower, and his drug brought her back to life, and he just married her to see her as the perfect project for himself. As Juno is willing to take 3 years of hell versus spending a lifetime with him, a great moment for a character who hasn't been on the screen a lot, but I really enjoyed this moment for her. Back with Madeline and Verna's discussion, a conversation about pain, as Verna is the master of it, but she's also its witness. She's wanting to offer Madeline clarity with no strings attached as they speak of poetry and truth, as she describes a location or a realm that she's found as she recites the popular poem by Edgar Allan Poe, The City in the Sea. A dark and gothic poem that describes a doomed city of sin that sinks to the bottom of the sea. The poem takes the reader through Death City. He rules this place from the throne and towers over it gigantically. The city is lit by nothing but the light from the sea, which I think is foreshadowing to what we might see in the finale, as Verna promises Madeline that she'll soon understand this moment of clarity. So we end this episode with seeing Lenore calling the police to help her mother. We see Freddy with construction workers ready to destroy this building. Now, before they tear down the building, Freddy wants to go inside, which I believe he was hoping to find the missing wedding ring from his wife. He pees on the floor as a goodbye to his brother Harry, and all of a sudden, he passes out. His footsteps approach closer to him. It's revealed to be Verna. As we learn, she is interfering with his death by putting deadly nightshade into his drugs. And the reason she did this was after he cruelly pulled his wife's teeth out. Cut to a scene of her possessing him doing this as his wife watches her do so. Very similar to what she did at the club. Verna tells him he earned this and impersonates his voice to tear down the building. She tells him that Rod would have been a poet in another life and Freddy would have been a good dentist, as he watches the wrecking ball move outside just like the clock at the beginning of this episode, but also just like the clock Dupin heard, a very great callback. She sits next to him as everything slowly starts falling down. We have a pendulum that's swinging right above him. It's almost like a symbol of how he was trying to kill his wife very, very slowly. As Verna says to him that his death wasn't meant to be this cruel, but after what he did, this was meant to be. As it gets closer and closer, she tells him that yes, your dad was wrong, but that's no excuse, as he slowly gets split in half. If you all remember, this was the vision that Roderick saw of his son when he was younger earlier in this episode. What a perfect callback and a perfect scene executed here. As we see Madeline telling her brother that Freddy has recently died and to remember the deal they made all those years ago, and there's only one way out. He needs to be the hero, as she hands her brother the drugs, and this is the only way. As she pours the drugs in his hand, he takes the drugs while drinking it, and as he's taking it, we see Madeline telling him he's a legend, he's a king, he's saving them all as he dies. We see Madeline hears a noise behind the wall but walks away as a mysterious hand comes to the frame and touches Roderick and wakes him up. It's no other than Verna, who tells him that she won't let him get off that easy. Now, the story this episode was based upon follows this main character who's experiencing being tortured. It's said that this story is effective when it's inspiring fear into his readers because it heavily focuses on senses such as sound and emphasizing the reality, unlike many of Edgar Allan Poe's stories, which are mostly based into supernatural. The story focuses on what horror really is, not the physical pain of death, but the terrible realization that a victim has no choice but to die. To me, this episode was incredibly written and did such a great job of describing what we saw Fred's wife going through, which in her mind being tortured, slowly being killed, to ultimately seeing that playing out with Freddie and how he died, and then even comparing that to what's going on with Dupin in this episode. He thought his career was over, and then even pairing that to Rod and how he lied, and all the clocks being a symbol of this episode of the time ticking for these characters. This is nothing short of an incredible episode, and it's easily the best episode so far and one of my favorite episodes of TV this year. As The Fall of the House of Usher episode 7 is in the books, and if I were to have any criticisms, it was maybe Juno's moment being a little bit more emotionally impactful, but we didn't spend that much time with the character, so I wish we would have had that moment just hit a little bit harder, but that's just a minor thing. Fred's death at the end, to me, was not only the most memorable, but also one of the most satisfying scenes of the show, and I am excited to experience how all this is going to end in episode 8. Thanks for watching this video. Consider hitting the like button if you all enjoyed today's breakdown and recap. Share this video as well as sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Click the video on the screen now or click the link in the description of this video to see my thoughts on the finale of this excellent show. Consider subscribing to the channel. You all have been awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.